my name is Bobby Reddy Jr. I'm the CEO of Prognosis. Prognosis is a biotech innovator focused on enabling true precision medicine in hospitals. What we do is we use proprietary data and analytics to create maps and GPS systems for acute disease or diseases in hospitals so that each patient gets the right treatment at the right time that's suited to their unique health profile. So today's talk is not just about what we're doing, but also with a focus on why we're doing it. About 15 years ago, my father was diagnosed with having a leaky heart valve. For those of you that don't know much about this, even though this is a high-risk situation, there are many treatment options available that can actually extend quality of life and reduce risk. But unfortunately, for many years, my dad avoided almost all of these options. At the beginning, I thought this was primarily due to stubbornness, and I think stubbornness did play a big part. But I started to understand that he had this fundamental lack of trust in the healthcare system that we have here in the United States. He really didn't believe that doctors in the healthcare system understood his individual condition. And now, after knowing a lot more about healthcare, I think that this concern was actually pretty justified. The healthcare system that we have today really focuses on protocols instead of people. It's all about one-size-fits-all approaches to treat people without understanding that each person has their own unique health signature and their own unique story. I mean, one example of this is that the same protocols run for sepsis in a hospital, whether it's a patient that's 20-year-old that's relatively healthy compared to a 75-year-old that has late-stage cancer. So it's the same protocols that we run. And when you take a step back and think about it, this is actually really crazy, right? We live in an age where everything is personalized, right? From your Netflix choices to the ads you see on Google, your navigational systems, Siri, Google Voice, it's all kind of designed around your own unique data signature. So why is it that healthcare has lagged so far behind this? I'm sure that all of you at some point have felt just like another number in line when you're waiting for healthcare. In my dad's case, this lack of trust led to inaction, which eventually led to him passing away 6 years ago. We have to do better. We need a system that can deeply understand the complexity of each person's health and suggest treatment strategies that are designed and tailored for that unique health signature. And we need to remember that people matter here, not protocols. And this is where we hope that Prognosis can make a big impact. So again, what we're doing is we're trying to enable precision medicine in hospitals where each patient is going to get personalized treatment based on optimizing their chances of having the longest and highest quality of life based on their unique health signature. Why do we want to start with hospitals? Well, unfortunately, for the most part, unless you're hit by a truck tomorrow, most of us are eventually going to end up spending some time in hospitals at some point. And when you think about it, hospitals are pretty incredible places. Within the walls of hospitals, most human lives come to incredible crossroads. They're places of triumph. They're also places of tragedy. They're home to some of the most dedicated and educated people in the world, as you saw from Andy today. Finally, there are huge consequences based on the decisions that are made in hospitals, right? These decisions literally define life or death. And even if you survive your hospital visit, they can define the quality of your life for your entire life. So we really can't afford to make bad decisions in hospitals. Because of this, you would expect and you would hope that hospitals would be one of the most streamlined and optimized places on the planet. But unfortunately, this really is not the case today. Doctors are often equipped with pretty outdated, and again, these one-size-fits-all tools and protocols to treat patients. When it comes down to it, there's actually very little technology that enables personalized medicine, or tailoring treatment to patients in hospitals. The crux of the problem really is that we don't actually have a good understanding of the complexity and heterogeneity of most of the diseases we find in hospitals. So what this means is that physicians are pretty lost sometimes when it comes to understanding a unique health profile of a patient because they just don't have the right tools to understand those patients. In many ways, this is almost like being in the modern world and trying to navigate the modern world without your phone and these GPS systems that we have, but instead having a map, like, for example, made by Magellan in the 15th century. So imagine like trying to go from home to some place that you go on vacation, not with a GPS system, but with this crude map that is incomplete and just has continents on it instead of all the roads and the streets you're trying to navigate. This is kind of like what doctors have today for many patients. And when you think about it, most of the training methodologies, how we train doctors, how they go through med school, is focused a lot on techniques that really haven't changed a lot over the last 20 to 30 years. So even though there's a lot of scientific literature out there that doctors can read, we're really depending on them to aggregate all of that information in their minds and incorporate all of that And even if they do that, the way that they use and utilize that information is subjective. And it depends on their own quote unquote data set, which is really their memory and their experiences. So how can we make this better? What ideally would they have in this situation? Well, it's pretty simple. I mean, coming back to that analogy of the maps and the GPS systems, ideally they would have these comprehensive, detailed, and accurate maps. And then they would have the ability to have these GPS systems that would be able to collect information from their patients, the right information at the right time, and then be able to synthesize and aggregate that information so that you could track a patient's location on the map over time and figure out what is the most optimal treatment for each of those patients. Instead of using, again, these one-size-fits-all approaches where you just do the same protocol no matter what the patient's state is like. So what we're really talking about here is precision medicine, right? We want to enable precision medicine in hospitals. We want to create these maps so that we have a deeper, better, more sophisticated understanding of each patient when they come in to define disease, and then we can make decisions that are based on data and free of bias and free of personal experiences that can change those decisions. So how do we do that? How do we enable precision medicine in hospitals? I mean, the good news is that we've already kind of done this in cancer, or we've started down that road in cancer. If there's anything we've proven in the last 2 decades, it's that we still haven't found a way to cure cancer. But what we've done is we found a way to divide and conquer cancer. What we do is we profile tumors. We get this deep biological data to better understand what type of tumor, what type of cancer does the patient have. And then we tailor the treatment based on that to optimize their chances of success. So this is exactly what Pernosis wants to do, but in hospitals and in acute care. In many ways, we kind of think of ourselves potentially as one of the only companies that has sequencing technology 15 years ago that is about to enable a whole new revolution of precision medicine, but focus on hospitals and acute care instead of on cancer. One thing that many people don't know is that a lot of these conditions in hospitals have huge impacts on society. For example, just one condition in hospitals, which is called sepsis. For those of you that don't know, sepsis is basically when an infection gets out of control. Sepsis by itself kills over 11 million people worldwide every year, which is actually more than all cancers combined together. And that's just one condition in hospitals. So if we want to enable this precision medicine in hospitals, how do we do that? Everything kind of flows from data. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but what we do is we want to collect objective data from enough past patients so that when a new patient comes in, you can profile that patient with a bunch of these important parameters. And then you can look at all those past patients and say, hey, these 1,000 patients had very similar signatures to our current patient. And therefore, because we know what happened to those past patients and we know what treatment worked for them, we know, what is going to work for our current patient, and we can place them on the map. So that's exactly what Pernosis has been doing for nearly a decade. We've been working with 10 hospitals to create a data set. To date, it's over 12,000 patients and over 60,000 blood samples that we've collected. And when I say blood samples, I literally mean the physical samples of blood that were collected from these patients in the hospital. What we do is that we take that blood into our own wet labs, and then we measure a lot of molecules that are not measured in the hospital today, but that are very important in how a human being responds to various different conditions. So we generate a lot of new, deeper biological data. It's almost like the sequencing data you get from tumors. And then what we do is we combine that data with all of the other data that they already do collect in the hospital environment to build this comprehensive data set to better map and better understand human disease. As far as we know, this is the largest data set and collection of blood samples that has ever been built, in this case, for human response to infection. And we want to more than double that before the end of the year. So what do we do with this data? I mean, the goal of the data is to close the information gap. We want to transform that data into these comprehensive maps of disease in hospitals so we can guide physicians to tailor treatment, to have personalized medicine in hospitals so that each patient is getting the most optimal treatment for their own unique health signature. So when we talk about that, we've already started doing that, and I'll just share some data you guys can see today. So what you see on the screen now is an actual map. Every point on this map is a different patient. There's thousands of patients on this map. And essentially what you can see with the different colors here are different, what I like to call continents, are different areas of the map that a patient can be on. And then depending on which color or which continent the patient's at, their chances of deterioration, their chances of dying in the hospital or being readmitted to the hospital in 30 days or staying a long time in the hospital or less time in the hospital are strongly affected by which continent you're on. And I know, when you see this map, your first instinct might be, oh, this kind of does look like the maps made by Magellan that I was talking about earlier. And that's because we're in early stages, right? This field is in early stages. But as we collect more and more data, we expect and we hope that these maps are going to become more and more granular until it eventually does resemble, the detailed street views that we have today in navigational systems. It's not just about, which continent you're on, as you can see here, but it's also about where you came from and where you end up going. So what you see here is a bunch of patients starting in kind of the death zone, where you have a higher chance of dying in the hospital. But you can see that some patients, the patients that end up surviving, end up escaping the death zone. And that's what you see in the middle. Those are the blue circles. Whereas the patients that don't escape the death zone, those are the patients that end up dying. So again, it's not just about, placing the patient on the map when they first come in. It's about understanding where they came from and where are they going, and constantly tailoring your treatment strategy to make sure that you're giving each patient exactly the treatment that they need at that time. I just wanted to share some of that actual data to show you what some of that can look like. So, we're a company in Chicago. We've been working on building these maps for nearly a decade, and we want to help to redefine disease. This talk is supposed to be about why we're doing that. And it really comes for us down to, we've seen these patients. We've seen too many patients suffer from inadequate care in hospital environments. There's too many mistakes, too many one-size-fits-all protocols, and too many people are just not getting the care, the most optimal care that would increase their chances of having the highest quality of life for the longest period of time. So we think, enough is enough. It's time that we bring a precision medicine revolution to acute care like it's happening in cancer. And so, if we're successful, we don't envision this. We just want to, mention, we don't envision this as something that's going to replace physicians. Sometimes we get asked about that. We really view this as a GPS system. Again, we're not a self-driving car. We're a tool that will help physicians make better decisions by plotting all this data and figuring out where their patients are in real time. So for that reason, we like to call our technology assisted intelligence, not artificial intelligence. And we hope and we believe that assisted intelligence tools will be some of the most powerful tools ever developed to help physicians make better decisions in hospitals. So finally, just to kind of wrap up this, this talk, I did want to talk a little bit about where we think this is all going, and say 5 to 10 years from now, if we're successful, what could that mean for you? What that can mean is that when you go into a hospital, we hope that it won't be as scary as it is today, because you'll know that the hospital has the resources and the tools and is taking the time to get to know you and get to know your own unique health signature before we make decisions about how to treat you. In today's world, unfortunately, the data that we collect from you if you go into a hospital is actually relatively sparse, and it's missing a lot of different dimensions that are important in describing, who you are and what kind of health signature you have. But in the future, we believe that, from your blood and from all sorts of measurements, we're going to be able to build an understanding of exactly what's happening with your biology and what's happening with your past medical conditions, so that we can really tailor the treatment based on your unique health signature. And the goal eventually is to be able to predict what's going to happen to you based on your signature. So we're getting ahead of disease and not waiting for you to crash before we treat it. So I really hope that, when that inevitable day comes, when you find yourself in a hospital or someone that you love is in a hospital, that you're going to find some comfort in knowing that we've finally made some progress in understanding the complexity and the heterogeneity of disease. I hope that if it's your mother or your father or your brother or your sister, that you're gonna believe that they're not just another nameless face in the hospital that's getting the same protocol and the same treatment as everyone else. I hope that we can deeply understand that they have a unique health situation and that we need to tailor the treatment based on that situation, not based on protocols. We've got to start making decisions based on people, not on protocols. And at the end of the day, we hope this is going to lead to, we've got to stop making bad decisions in hospitals, which results in unnecessary death, in increased suffering, and reduced quality of life. So just to conclude, when it really comes down to it, there's nothing more precious than high quality time with the people that you love. And we hope that we will enable that in the future. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.